We're here with Tillamook County Sheriff Andy Long this afternoon talking about the sheriff's race. We have some questions to ask Sheriff Long, beginning with, if elected sheriff, what concrete steps could you take to reduce domestic violence in Tillamook County?
Well, domestic violence is a serious issue. In the past I've been involved in some training along with our deputies and in coordination with the Women's Resource Center. And we carry cards with us that help us with, it's a real dynamic call to respond to a domestic violence call. And those cards help us with guidelines on helping victims get to some support. And just last year I was part of a small committee that reviewed our domestic violence protocol. And, and that included the Women's Resource Center and Kathleen and Romy and Judge Lemery and myself, and we reviewed that. We compared it with other counties to make sure that we were up on par and to see if there's any good ideas out there. And then that was submitted to all the other agencies, including the DA's office, and for their review to see if there's anything they want to change. And I think that's been completed, and that has been my part in it. I think overall, really managing the calls and coordinating with all the other agencies that are involved and having good relationships with those agencies so that we can get help to the victims and have them support for after the call, and then the programs that we have that are in custody, that sometimes people that abuse also have other issues such as addictions, and I think that having those programs in custody are solid and help with putting families maybe back together in the future without those outside influences of addiction.
Thank you. The sheriff is responsible for a budget of $6 million plus. Describe your experience managing a complex budget.
Well, I managed some budget while I was in the Coast Guard. I didn't manage much of a budget when I first started my career in the Sheriff's Office, but for the last, about 7 years, I've been managing a considerable, well, half the budget while I was a jail manager was the Sheriff's Office budget. And the last 2 years I managed the whole Sheriff's Office budget. When I've always come in under budget, I've always returned money to the general fund. The budget in the jail is always is kind of a dicey one because some things in those budget lines can't be predicted, such as medical, and so they have to be watched very closely. And I think I'm very fiscally conservative, and the budget's important to me, and it's important to be a good steward to the citizens' money. We have a brown grass at the Sheriff's Office. We don't even water there, so I think it's important, and I have a lot of experience with that, and I haven't missed a budget meeting in I bet about those 7 years, maybe one, but not very many.
Thank you. The Sheriff's Office is dependent upon the general fund for operating expenses. Talk about how you would address a revenue shortfall in the Sheriff's Office.
Well, that'd be tough. We run pretty thin right now. I consider the jail at minimum staffing. We have the mandatory requirements to the state to have the jail and have civil process and some other things, but the first thing that you would have to do would first affect the patrol side of the office first, and if there were ever personnel are very expensive, and if you had to reduce considerably, you would have to look at personnel as a reduction. So if there were layoffs, we would lose a couple of detectives probably first. They'd come back into the patrol division. And that'd be a loss, but I would do everything I could to not ever tell the citizens that we aren't going to answer some sort of call. It obviously would affect our services, there's no question about that. It would probably take us longer to get to some calls that are non-emergency, but we would always get to them. But I think that would be the first thing you would have to look at with the patrol side of the jail. If I were to do any reductions in the jail, I think that immediately you would be looking at some pretty serious liabilities. It wouldn't be as safe for both staff and for inmates to have less. Our jail by design is going to be a tough one where you couldn't just close a wing and lay off 10% of your deputies. It's an indirect design jail, which is the deputies aren't always in their indirect supervision with inmates, and so they do. It's already designed to have less staff than most other jails in Oregon because our facility is new.
Thank you. The sheriff is responsible not only for law enforcement in the unincorporated areas of the county, but also for the jail and probation and parole and probation. There are statewide regulations for jails and corrections departments. Describe your experience managing agencies and meeting state standards.
Well, I don't have as much experience with parole and probation as I do the other two divisions in our office. However, I make that up with a good undersheriff who understands parole and probation and came from that division. She has a couple of years of experience there. In my 6 years in the jail, I was a lead jail inspector for Oregon. There was about 6 teams. I was one of 6 teams, so I have a lot of experience in understanding what those standards are in Oregon. I was on the committee that did one of the first revisions. It's been several years now. I think it was 2006. I was on the committee that did the revision for statewide jail standards, and so I'm very familiar with them. They're going through a short revision now, and so we'll be getting a partial of it being new. I'm very familiar with the patrol requirements and keep up with case law. It's something that you constantly have to do, and when you get a new case law come down, your policies have to be adjusted, so I'm very familiar with that also.
Great, thank you. As an executive level manager and leader, how would you represent Tillamook County?
Well, I'm very committed. I attend community meetings. I've met, gone to the town halls. I know what our issues are here, and especially there's some issues that are specific to rural public safety, and I feel like I understand those issues and those challenges, and I know how to prioritize those, and and I think that we do a pretty good job here for what we have in resources. I think that I represent us well when I leave the county, and I developed some really good relationships over the years where I think it'll be important that if we ever needed resources, I would have them here because of those relationships and representing us in a professional way.
Thank you. And finally, in the event of a cataclysmic disaster, such as the Tohoku earthquake of March 2011, how will the Sheriff's Office respond?
Well, as the executive law enforcement officer of the county, many times the sheriff is the incident commander on those cases. Todd was. I rotated with him on shifts, and so I have experienced that. I was at incident command just about from the start to finish on the Japan quake, and I learned an awful lot. I think all of us did on that case, and how our response was, and that we had a big response, and we found that we could have done a lot less, but still been very effective. And I've been qualified as an incident commander. You have to go through the National Incident Command System and learn the processes of that, and there's different levels of it. And I've been through that over the last several years so that I could be qualified to do that. Our sergeants and lieutenants and all of the upper command staff in the Sheriff's Office are also qualified in the Incident Command System, and can pretty much walk right in the door and understand what their role is depending on whatever it is they're given. So I think we do really well. I've been told, and working close with Gordon, the emergency manager, is that we are a catastrophe-rich county, and so I think you could put us up against anybody. I think we do a really good job with our experience here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.